It's time for the movie raid, and tonight's victim is reoccurring victim, and that would be Mick Strawn. That has done many things. Yes, that's you, Mick. Reoccurring.
So what you're saying is I'm like a cold sore?
Nightmare on Elm Street 4. So if you got your book going on that you wrote, how long has this book been out exactly? I mean, how long have you been working on this book?
Oh, you know what? I worked on it for about 7 months. And I first came out, I know when it came out. It came out in August of last year. And so it's kind of coming up on, 9 months or so? So let's drop it off at cons. You know, I actually sold 70 of them at a con this weekend. The thing is I haven't really had much time to, concentrate on selling them because I've been working since the beginning of the year on Vengeance, a Friday the 13th fan film. I tried to bring a certain level of professionalism and certainly a very high level of lunacy to it.
Going to be making a Vengeance book later?
That's a good question. I don't know. You know what? I have a book about Nightmare on Elm Street 3 to write first. I have another book in mind. I want to write a book of shooting practically compared to the modern shooting digitally and kind of what there is to learn about the two of them from each other. I want to write a book about the lunacy of working the 80s in the film business in horror, which was completely lunatic. It was absolutely, the cast of characters, as well know, is completely bizarre. You know, you have your Steve Johnsons, and you have all your really great, weird behind-the-camera people. The stuttering Jack Shoulder, Toby universe, you know. Why can't I think of his name from Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Toby Hooper, right? You know, you've got that kind of crazy, and then you've got the Steve Johnson, coked out monster all the time, crazy, and you had Bob Shays kind of crazy, and I worked with a lot of crazies. Sam Raimi crazy? Sam Raimi crazy is a special kind of crazy. I knew Wes Craven. Wes Craven seemed like a bookkeeper crazy, the nicest guy in the world. But you would never suspect that he ever did anything that he was a writer and director of some of the most horrifying films around. You'd never know. He was just a sweet guy. I had that to write about. I have things to say.
Let's say them. Yeah, with working Nightmare on Elm Street 4, was there a high demand in terms of anything in terms of getting it completed on time? Or were you restricted or limited because it was a sequel?
Well, yeah. I for one thing, it was released a year after the Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and so it was pretty much we put Nightmare on Elm Street 3 when we were just finishing that up, and as we were cleaning up the stage and stuff, we literally started immediately. We had from February until August. That's when it came out. It was a very short period of time. We limited quite a bit of the opticals in it. On Nightmare on Elm Street 3, we had some time to do opticals. On Nightmare on Elm Street 4, we had very little time for opticals. So absolutely, as many things as you can possibly imagine were done practically. We would have to work things out practically. A perfect example would be the scene where Alice is sucked into the TV screen.
That's a good scene.
It's a great scene. She comes into the theater, and we filmed. That was filmed all over LA. And let me give you an example of places that you didn't think that involved that film, okay, or that particular sequence. We started by walking into the theater in Pasadena, the great old, I think it was the Rialto? I can't remember which one it was. It was basically decrepit. So we start with her buying the ticket and going into the theater, and then you get to see the theater, and you get to see the balcony of the theater, and you get to see the roof that has the big beams across it. And then she sits down, and there's a bunch of people there that eventually are the people that are the Elm Street kids. What you're actually looking at is we took that whole balcony and we replicated it on a stage, and we built it on a couple of tractors that had big pitch arms on them. As the scene goes and she gets her popcorn and her Coke and she walks up and she sits down, we start to pitch the whole thing up in the air and pitch it up forward until it was actually hanging straight at a 90-degree angle. You get to see it, you get to see her fall forward, and it looks like she's being sucked into the screen. But you do the shot, you have a couple of setup shots, like the popcorn spilling straight forward and the Coke spilling straight forward. And then her stunt double scrambles. When it's at 90 degrees, she's scrambling down the face what's now a 90-degree wall. It's a wall, not a floor. Now she's scrambling down, she's scrambling down, she's scrambling. She gets to that edge, and she's holding on for dear life to that edge. Then we're filming in Hollywood, and we're in front of this 8-story fur storage building. It was really cool because literally an 8-story high refrigerator. And what they did is Beacons actually would store furs for people in rich part of town, like Beverly Hills and stuff. And it was just floor after floor after floor after floor of racks of furs, right? And so we have this huge wall, and we took and we planted the beams on it, 8 stories high. We ran them up on 2 cables and pulled the cables up to the top, and there would be a beam and a beam and a beam and a beam that were duplicates of the painted beams that were in the theater. Now we have her. We've literally got a crane there, and we've lifted the set piece that is the edge of the balcony. We've lifted it up into the air with her stunt double, and now the camera is up on a crane looking right across as she lets go of that, and we see her go in front of the beams behind her, actually. Boom, 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 boom. You see her fall into a big paper blue screen, and she tears through the blue screen, falls into the safety bag, and that blue screen is what Elm Street Crave in black and white is projected on. People have called me before from all over the world, I'm not kidding, and to ask me how we did that shot. There were no wires, there was no rigging, there was nothing like that. I mean, it literally was a fall, and absolutely nobody ever figured out that. I don't think that anybody ever called up and said, oh, you did that and that was a fall.
What was a more challenging optical effect for you? Like, in terms of, like, did anything run really smoothly on between both of the films that you worked on? I mean, what was the real challenge on some of these?
You know what was the most challenging optical effect? And not because things went smoothly, but because things went horribly wrong, right? The junkyard. Now, when we built the junkyard, it actually took us 6 weeks, basically stacked 8 cars high, and it was actually a maze laid out according to a model that I had built. And the model had enough ways, different turns and so forth in it, and blank spots, so that you would have the ability to work behind these, making the cars come in and out, and doing all that rigging that I did in combination with Peter Chesney. If you read the book, Peter Chesney tells great stories about, rigging all these things in between the two of us, because for one thing, we're really good friends, and I have always been, and he was the mechanical effects coordinator. And so for 6 weeks, we got to rig all these cars in this big junkyard to make it look exactly like it did on my model. Now, here's the thing. It's at the same time that I was working with him there on the practical, actual set, which was amazing. You wouldn't do that these days, right? I mean, you wouldn't build anything this big. I mean, that's not the way that we have to do it these days. There would be like 3 cars on a big green screen somewhere, and everything else would be created, But this is actually, it was that big. It was about an acre of cars. I think it was just shy of 300 cars that we actually stacked, and they're cabled, and they're safetied, and they're rigged in every way you could possibly imagine for all the effects and stunts, and some of them had to start, some of them had to burst into flames, and lights had to turn on. It took 6 weeks to put it all together. It works itself up to the shot of Kincaid spinning around in a circle, and the camera over him. And we did that practically, and we pulled up. Now, the optical people had a model they were working on the same model that I had built for this. They used the same model so that they had the same sweeps, the same layout as cars. And they built it so that it was bigger than that, right? When we were done with doing the plate of Joey spinning and going, Freddy's back, Freddy's back, when we were done shooting that plate, then we sent it to them. This was in the days of film, and you sent them the developed film, and then they started filming their model work on top of it, right? And so 2 weeks later, we're sitting in one of the screening rooms, and the labs that developed film would have a screening room, and you could go in there and you could see it. Now, we go to the screening room. This is 2 weeks after we're finished, and the optical people show us what they had. And here's the thing. We had all along and we had storyboards, and we had this model, and it was supposed to start from the model, and in the storyboards it keeps coming up and up and up and up, and he's going, Freddy's back, Freddy's back. And then you literally see the edges of the world in the storyboards. Do you remember that? You remember that from the film, right?
Yes, I do.
So if you remember that there was a square part kind of in the center that looked really obvious. They came out on the first one, the first time. They said, okay, well, there you go. And I go, well, that's great. Now, when are you going to have the rest of it done? What do you mean the rest of it done? I mean, that's it. That's the world. They go, no, that's not the world. That's that's maybe a simulation of 150 feet high. I mean, at best, we're trying to make it into a world. I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to give you $15,000 out of my budget. You go, you finish it, and you come all the way up, and it's a world. 2 weeks later, they come back with a new piece of film, and it comes back, and it comes back, and it comes back, and it looks like maybe you're a quarter of a mile up, right? I was like, okay, well, where's my world? They go, well, here's the thing I have to say, is back then, the optical effects people, you know, the guys who did the printers and the stop motion things and stuff like that, it tended to be bricks. And so what they would do is they would always assume that they were smarter than you, right? Because they had the big optical printers and this and that, and the next thing, it's like, okay. So the guy goes, look, man, here's the thing. If you started doing that, if you started to come back at this rate of speed, then it would take you approximately 3 hours to get to the point where you were actually far enough out so that you just saw the planet as a planet. And I was like, wait a minute, you're using reality and physics to explain to me why I can't just have a world? Are you out of your mind? This is Freddy. Listen, here's the thing. I'm going to give you $15,000 more, and boy, when I see it, it better look like a circle. And I just took a Sharpie out and started to draw circles all over this guy's office. Like, even on the door, I drew an enormous circle and said, this is what I want it to look like, and signed it Mick Strawn. I probably was not, at that point, my happiest. So, finally, they came back. And by the way, I might say that they went from a very detailed model to an interactive mat. The last thing that they did was just a straight mat, to come out to the edge of the world. And basically, its quality was sort of like it was done by the 3-year-old with a lot of crayons. That is exactly what you see there is a month and a half of me arguing with the optical effects people. It was hard to understand where they were coming from on that, and I thought that they were just trying to explain. And Dream Quest, they were the ones that we used on doing Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And by the time we did Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Dream Quest was probably the biggest newcomer in the business, right? They were renting all these places up in Simi Valley, I think. And they had literally taken over just about every square foot of warehouse space that was anywhere near them, trying to build enough stages to do enough optical work to cover everything that they had figured that they were doing. The primary bulk of what they did was true stop motion. Like ships on control track, spaces of black and stuff like that. So they were just crazy busy, just enough to drive me nuts.
Was this a time period where these sequels may not become what they could have been in the future? I mean, this was in the 80s, and most of the time, sequels can go good and bad at this point, but do you think this has actually shaped up the Nightmare on Elm saga, or do you think it actually made it less than what it is now?
It gets criticized all the time for not staying super dark, like the original Nightmare on Elm Street. But you know what? Here's the thing. You had the evolution of a character. One of the problems that you had with Freddy is that Freddy has the Superman problem. And the Superman problem is that no matter what you do, Superman's got to win because he's Superman, right? So Freddy's the same way. Is no matter what happens, is you eventually got to go to sleep, and when you do, Freddy comes in your dreams and takes care of you, right? So by the time we hit 3, we kind of had solved the Superman problem with getting together and dreaming as a group, which is the same thing that they carry on into the third, into the fourth, and the fifth. But that makes it so that you don't have the Superman problem. The other thing that really helps a lot is that we started to use Robert Englund. We started to use his character a lot more. I mean, we were like showing more of him, and he had great lines and stuff like that, and everybody that was horrified that he wasn't as scary anymore. But personally, I really loved it because one thing, I considered the third and fourth more of adventures than horror films.
Well, I think with the 3 and 4 is because we're experimenting of what could possibly kill Freddy, but we clearly see that in the sequels that clearly it's not going to work. Like, okay, we see these kids, they think they're going to win because in a dream world, it's their dream. They can control whatever they want. They can be whatever they want, and they can overcome whatever Freddy is, and he's all made out of nightmare and all the bad stuff. Well, what they don't realize is Freddy, once he's in your world, he takes your world. He is the dream master, so to speak, and he's the one that can take anything that you can throw at him and turn it right against you. And I think that's a really cool mechanism to learn what Freddy is, and not just kill you in your dreams, because now we learn that he can expand even further than what he is, and that's what I love throughout each sequel.
And we're expanding at the same time. You know, that's the thing that was great about 3 and 4 together is that the kids are learning how to get together, and what you're watching is you're watching like the continuation of World War II.
Oh yeah, man! But I love how he screws around with his victims. Like this is the best part though. These are teenagers. These aren't adults. See, teenagers still have fear. Adults eventually they grow out of fear on certain things. But like especially trying to fight against a man with a claw. But with teenagers, man, you can easily prey on their weaknesses, because especially when they're dreaming. I think that's a really cool concept of that, because some people are like, oh, well, he's a wuss, and no, when you fall asleep, and he's there, you're dead, dude. You're dead.
That's right.
I mean, I don't see how much that's a wuss part of it all, but I think that's a really cool concept. Like, going back to the first film, we didn't have much screen time at all, but I mean, we saw like he's like this really like brutal serial killer at first, and then it kind of disappears. But I like the fact that as the sequels grew, we learned a lot more. Yeah, the character is shaped up. The character has reformed, like in the previous one where he was screwing around with the kid that drew comic books, made him into a video game character. And I mean, some people didn't like the comedic part of it, but I love it because he was all playing with him as a video game. And he says, "Well, you forgot about the Power Glove, buddy."
Yeah, exactly. That's 3, 4, and 5 to me is a cool trilogy. I mean, really, it's got a lot to be said for it. And if you read my book, there's so many great stories in there about people trying to do their best and under this amazing amount of stress. And you had things like you had a dog that pisses fire, and the mechanism that pissed fire the first time just burned the dog to the ground. There's just stories like that. Like I'll give you an example of the dream loop. We were in a dream loop, and we had started with a 60-page outline. We didn't even actually have a script. Started with a 60-page outline, and in the middle of this outline, it just leaves us in this dream loop. You have a truck driving away, and then Alice coming around the corner of the Grave Inn, right? And we had many meetings. We were on the third meeting trying to figure out what we were going to do about, writing ourselves out of that dream loop. We were sitting there at a meeting, and I swear, I'm just listening to the meeting had been going on for 2 hours. They were talking about some point. They actually did some of the stuff that they said in that meeting on one of the later films. Now in an airplane, they're flying along, and we were actually having a discussion about who was Freddy. Was he the stewardess, or was he the co-pilot, and Dan was or Alice? And I'm just sitting there. I was like, oh God, I just wish we hit nothing. And there's this kid that was sitting over the corner meeting, and he goes, so what would that look like? I went, yeah, what would that look like? And then I went, oh, dude. And I'm having like a discussion with myself in the middle of this meeting going, yeah, I know. It would be like you hit your own bumper. It'd be like hitting your front bumper at 70 miles an hour. Oh, yeah. And I said it out loud, and Peter Chesney points at me and goes, I can do that. And it was sold. We hit nothing. It looked amazing. But to me, 1, 3, and 4, not only the best of the Freddy series, but kind of the best of some of the 80s horror filmmaking, I thought that we did a pretty good job overall. My book, I've had several people say this, and I'm just trying to say what other people have said, and the feeling that I wanted to get from it. It actually it gives you this feeling of being there on the set, totally understanding everything that's going on, because it has all these people. The book itself is populated with 45 voices of the different people, and my voice is kind of like the single voice that's pulling this all together. And that's exactly the way the filming was. So that gives you the feeling of actually being there. And this is what a lot of people have said, is that they've said that as they read it, they feel like they're on the set. They can describe it as this, you have blood on your hands, you had the drink hair grease underneath your fingernails, and you just desperately needed sleep. So you can get my book. You can go to behindthescreamsbook.com and order it. That's the best way to get a hold of it. Or you can just get a hold of me, Mick Strawn. I'm on Facebook. Really easy to get a hold of. You know what? I'm going to get myself back to working on the next book, which is going to be Behind the Screams 3.
Oh, don't forget the reboot.
Yeah, and then the reboot.
There you have it, everybody. This is Mick Strawn right here. So check out his book. Buy his book. Buy it.